Drake Baldwin's Rookie of the Year candidacy just got a massive boost. Let's talk about that and more on a special notebook edition of Braves Today. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Friday, October 31st. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Hilariously, at this point now, the Toronto Blue Jays are favored to win the World Series, which makes sense. They're up 3-2. They're heading back home. They just need to win one game. Minus 240 for the Blue Jays, plus 198 for the Dodgers. But as I've said on the radio, in the podcasts, all the stuff I've been doing for the World Series, the Dodgers are the favorites in Game 6 because Yoshinobu Yamamoto is on the mound. They are a minus 1.5, 1.5 run favorite to win Game 6, but the Blue Jays are still favored to win the World Series. If you're ready to get started, go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. I got a couple of... I wanted to empty out the notebook as we're getting to the end of the season here, right? The World Series will be done either tonight or tomorrow, which means free agency, all that stuff will start next week. A lot of the news is going to start rolling out on its own. And so I wanted to kind of dump out the notebook of all of the stuff that I had put aside. Wasn't worth a full show, wasn't worth a full newsletter, but covered a couple different topics. So I'm going to talk about some of the prospect debuts that stood out this year and some of my thoughts there. We're going to talk about hiring a manager, some of the trends we've seen already in the guys that have been hired. There's 3 open spots as of time of recording. But before we do that, let's talk about Drake Baldwin's case for Rookie of the Year, because that's something where he was trying to stay ahead of Jacob Misiorowski at midseason and Isaac Collins. Misiorowski got hurt. Collins kind of backed off a little bit. And then it was Cade Horton. Cade Horton of the Cubs came storming in late and is the biggest threat to Rookie of the Year for Drake Baldwin. The official award does not come out until mid-November. Okay, the official award from Major League Baseball, the one that gets you the prospect promotion incentive draft pick, will come out in mid-November. But we've seen some other awards from other places be given out with different layers of meaning behind them. Cade Horton won the Rookie of the Year award from the Sporting News. Okay, and Drake Baldwin won the award. Technically, it's NL Outstanding Rookie from the Major League Baseball Players Association. They have the Players' Choice Awards, which they announced this week. And Baldwin won the Outstanding Rookie Award in the National League from the MLBPA. And so a couple of people have been like, hey, which one of these matters? And really, technically, neither one of them does, right? The only thing you could really take away from these awards with any sort of certainty is if the same guy wins both of them, you got to feel pretty good they're probably going to win the main award too. Nick Kurtz of the Athletics won both of these awards in the American League. He's almost certainly going to win the actual Rookie of the Year award. But you can look at where there's overlap between this outside award and the official award from MLB, and that's a good thing for the Braves. So the Sporting News Award, it is right seemingly half the time. Half the time, the Sporting News winner lines up with MLB's winner, okay? You go back, let's look at the last couple years. 2020, the Sporting News got one of these two right. 2021, they got one of these two right. 2022, they got one of these two right. 2023, they got them both right. And then followed that up with getting them both wrong in 2024. And by wrong, I mean different from Major League Baseball's official award. So the Sporting News one that Cade Horton won is at best around 50% accurate. Flip side of this is the MLBPA award, which is voted on directly by players and just players. There's no executives, there's no managers, there's no baseball writers, nothing. It's just players. That one has been in existence for 31 years. And of those 31 years, 21 of them, the players' votes directly matched the actual vote. And so it feels like, given the fact that the players have skewed a little closer to what the actual award has ended up being in the history of giving out that award, we should feel a little bit better about Drake Baldwin getting the award over Cade Horton. And let's be clear, I am fully convinced that Drake Baldwin deserves the award over Cade Horton. Because by multiple different measures, Drake Baldwin has had a bigger impact than Cade Horton did. If you look at full season impact, obviously Drake Baldwin was up on opening day. He was up all year. He didn't play every game because not very many catchers do, and by very many, I mean any catcher. But he played 124 games this year. He hit 274. When you look at, in the National League, he had the 4th best batting average. When you look by WRC plus at 125, he had the 3rd best WRC plus, and he led in WAR at 3.1. Cade Horton, by reflection here, 118 innings, he made 22 starts, so he was up for a while. It wasn't the full season. He had 2.2 WAR, so almost a full win above replacement, lower than Drake Baldwin. When you kind of look at him where his ERA stood, it was the 9th best rookie ERA in the National League. And Cade Horton was especially, I'm going to argue, lucky, as in he way overperformed the inputs. Okay? Actual ERA of 2.67. His expected ERA, 3.92. A run and a third worse than what he actually performed. His fielding independent pitching was a 3.58, nearly a run worse than his actual ERA number. And that fielding independent pitching was pretty lucky too, because the expected FIP was 4.27. So, again, to kind of zoom out a little bit on this here, Cade Horton didn't play the full season and was exceptionally lucky with his results versus the inputs and what his results deserved. If you look at expected results as what you should have gotten, or expected stats as what you should have gotten, he was exceptionally lucky this season. Drake Baldwin, by contrast, was one of the best hitters, rookie hitters, in the National League. He was one of the best hitters, period, with runners in scoring position. And he was considered to be unlucky compared to a lot of other people. ERA, average of 274, expected of 282, not that bad. Slugging of 469, expected of 493. And literally the only thing that's in blue on his StatCast is his caught stealing above average. We saw him struggle early in the year. He got much better with it, by the way. And his sprint speed. Everything else is at least towards average or bright red. So Drake Baldwin underperformed a lot of his stats. Cade Horton overperformed a lot of his stats. And it just feels like at the end of the day, this tells us that Drake Baldwin should be Rookie of the Year. Now, the big question here is, will all of the voters feel the same way? Because sometimes the voters do dumb stuff. But the reason why this matters, and we need to see this happen, is because that draft pick is going to be inside the top 30. Okay, last year, the Royals got a pick for Bobby Witt Jr., being the runner-up for MVP. That pick came in 28th. The very first PPI pick given out for Julio Rodriguez winning Rookie of the Year for the Mariners was number 29 in 2023. Because teams that go into the third luxury tax tier, your top draft pick is moved back 10 spots. So there are going to be teams that get pushed back 10 spots out of the top 30. So Atlanta has a top 30 pick at stake if they get this. When you combine that with the fact that they should end up having a pick that is likely, I think if you go by the record that they finished with on Tankathon, they should be in the top 6. Which is, so you have a top 6 pick and the money that comes along with that, combined with another pick inside the top 30, this could be a massive draft for Atlanta. And let me kind of illustrate for you how big this draft could be, okay? So in 2025, picking in the 20s, like they were with one additional pick, a compensatory pick for Max Fried, the Braves had a total draft pool of $9.08 million, okay? That was their total draft pool. You can exceed that by up to 5% and not pay a penalty on the overage. Or, it's just a minor penalty on the overage. If Atlanta gets the number 6 overall pick this upcoming year, the draft pool size for that pick alone in 2025 was $7.5 million. The money for just that pick was within $1.5 million of Atlanta's entire pool last draft. And if you add in, let's say you add in number 28, that pick was another $3.25 million. $3.28 million was the slot value of that pick. So Atlanta's first round pick and the PPI pick, if they get it, could together have a bonus pool more than the entire 2025 draft of the Atlanta Braves. And that's if the Braves end up 6th. They could end up higher. They could have the number 1 overall pick. They could have 4. They could have 8. But the point is, they're going to have a really big draft pool this year because of that. And then when you turn around and give them an additional PPI pick, Atlanta's going to have, if all this happens, one of the largest draft pools in this entire class. By comparison, the Pirates had the 6th pick last year. They did not have a PPI pick, although I do believe they had a compensatory pick, right? Or a competitive balance pick. I'm sorry. I think they had an extra competitive balance pick. So they had a little bit of additional picks being given to them somewhere, but a little bit farther back. I think they had a competitive balance B pick, so after the 2nd round maybe. Anyway, their draft pool was $14 million. That's why Rookie of the Year matters. And if we're going off of the other awards that were given out, Drake Baldwin should be the favorite to get it in mid-November. In just a second, we saw another manager come off the board on Thursday. Let's talk about the state of the managers and what this means for the Braves. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Delete Me. You guys have heard me talk about this now for most of the month. I'm a person that, obviously, I have a website, a newsletter, I have a podcast, my face, my name is on the internet and all of that stuff. And I try to keep my internet self separate from my family and everything. And that's a great place for Delete Me to help, right? Because Delete Me, the New York Times Wirecutter called them their top pick for data removal services. Privacy is important to me. I try not to talk about give my kids names and things like that. But Delete Me is a great resource to help you take control of your data and keep your private life private. And they're offering Braves Today listeners a special discount. You can get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/HIT and use promo code HIT at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/HIT and enter promo code HIT at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/HIT, promo code HIT. Welcome back to Braves Today. Second segment of the show. Going through the notebook, emptying this out before we get to the offseason and free agency. Next time we have a show, unless a manager gets hired over the weekend, will probably be Monday, where honestly we could have an announcement on Sunday. Because most of the job openings have been filled by now. There was another one on Thursday. News broke, it wasn't official from the team, but news broke from Jeff Passan, who else, that that Washington Nationals were hiring Blake Butera, who was the senior director of player development for the Rays before coming over to Washington. He's 33 years old. He'll be the youngest manager in baseball. He's never managed before, to my knowledge. And honestly, on that real quick, I think this is a great hire by Washington. Like, that's a young team. They've got to get these guys better. Butera did that. He was able to get a bunch of these Rays, both pitchers and hitters, oversee their development in the minor league system for the Rays. I think it's a fantastic hire. I think it's a very smart grab by Paul Taboni, the new GM. And I'm if this works out, this is a little bit nerve-wracking for the Braves. But again, this is the 7th of the open spots to be filled so far. If we're counting Don Kelly in Pittsburgh having the interim tag taken off. Not everybody does. But if we're counting that, then this is the 7th. Really, it was 9 open spots, and 6 of them were done. So Skip Schumacher was the Rangers manager on October 3rd, the day before we met with AA. That was preordained. That was going to happen. We all knew that was going to happen. But the rest of them are really interesting. Kurt Suzuki, as Angels manager, 1-year deal. That's incredibly rare, but it lines him up with GM Perry Manassian, who also is on a 1-year deal. I wonder if Manassian feels the pressure to win in this 1 year so that he doesn't lose his job, although part of me speculates that might just be so that Art Moreno doesn't have to pay a manager during a lockout offseason. Tony Vitello was hired by the Giants on October 22nd. No managerial experience. It's college. No pro managerial experience. Same as Suzuki. Craig Albernaz was hired as the Orioles manager on the 26th, Sunday. Another guy, he has minor league experience, no major league experience. And the 2 most recent guys off the board, we saw Derek Shelton, former Pirates manager, hired by the Twins on Wednesday, and then Butera on Thursday. And the thing here, the big observation is all of these hires, Skip and Shelton, are the only ones that had prior MLB managerial experience as the full-time manager. Obviously, Kelly was the interim in Pittsburgh, and they took the interim tag off of him. But the rest of these guys, 2 of them, Albernaz and Butera, have minor league experience. Butera did manage a little bit in the minors for Tampa Bay before he became the player development guy. And then Albernaz did manage a little bit in the minors as well. But Suzuki, when he retired, he joined the front office for a little bit as a special assistant and then manager. Vitello, again, college guy through and through. He's never worked in the pros. It's just teams are more willing to go after guys without managerial experience, both not having MLB managerial experience, which of these 6 jobs, 4 of them don't have it, and even still willing to go after guys with no minor league managerial experience, Suzuki and Vitello both. And so when you look at the open positions here, you've got the Padres, you've got the Rockies, and you've got the Braves. And the good thing is, a lot of the names that are in Atlanta's finalist group, and we did this show earlier in the week where Atlanta's finalists are Danny Lehman of the Cubs. I'm sorry, of the Dodgers, Ryan Flaherty of the Cubs, and George Lombard of the Tigers. None of those guys have major league managerial experience. Lombard's been a minor league manager. Flaherty has not. Lehman has not. Neither one of them have any managerial experience at all, short of like an interim for a day or something while somebody was out. And the good news is there's not a lot of overlap with the Rockies and Padres. The Rockies, Warren Schaefer was the interim. They've been linked publicly to Daniel Descalso, bench coach for the Cardinals. But outside of that, there's not a lot of news about other guys they're looking into. The Padres, there's speculation that David Ross is a candidate of theirs. He's been ruled out of Atlanta's job. Mark Loretta, special assistant for the Padres, is in their list. AJ Ellis, another special assistant, is in their list. Phil Nevin, former manager, is in their list. So reportedly, they haven't interviewed Scott Service, which is weird because he's a special assistant in their front office. That's really weird that they haven't interviewed him. He's a former manager, but they've not talked to him. Ryan Flaherty is the only bit of overlap here. He was, and we talked about this on the show we did about him, he was a bench coach for the Padres, and he actually interviewed for the job the last time it was open and didn't get it. So he interviewed for the job, did not get the job, and then is now reportedly speculated that he's a candidate for the job again. So he's the only guy where there's overlap. And the longer that this takes, because we're seeing, and I told you guys that like MLB, the commissioner's office doesn't want these things to happen during the World Series. Right? They would rather you get it done before or wait until after. Now, we've seen some news leak and stuff, right? Obviously, Blake Butera, that leaked on Thursday. That was reported by Jeff Passan. Derek Shelton came out on Wednesday. But a lot of those weren't driven by the team. Those were broken by outside sources. It's possible the Braves are waiting for after the World Series to announce Danny Lehman. And the longer this goes, the more I think that's the guy, right? We talked about this in the show. He has a connection to Anthopoulos. He's a lot younger. He's 40 years old. I mean, it's weird to think that the Braves manager is the same age as me. That's a weird feeling, you know, because for a while, you're younger than the players. Then you're the same age as the players. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm the age of the manager. That's weird. But to go along with that, like, if it was George Lombard, they could have announced this before the World Series started. They could have announced it on an off day, right? They could have already made that happen. So the longer that this takes, the more that I tend to think Danny Lehman's the guy. Another interesting observation here, and I should have mentioned it earlier when I talked about this. Rocco Baldelli was fired by the Twins for them to hire Derek Shelton. Those two guys are like best friends. Like, they're really good friends. I wonder if this is awkward for them. And I'm assuming it's not. Because Brian Snitker and Freddie Gonzalez stayed friends, even though Brian Snitker was given Freddie Gonzalez's job when Freddie got fired. Freddie Gonzalez got fired as manager of the Braves. It put the interim tag onto Brian Snitker. And then at the end of the season, thanks to Nick Markakis and Freddie Freeman leading the push from the players, the interim tag was removed, and he was the full-time manager. And then they were good enough friends where Snit was okay with hiring Freddie to come in as third base coach mid-season last year. I just thought that was interesting. But again, I'm assuming the World Series ends. We don't know if it's going to end on Friday or Saturday. If it ends on Friday, we could have a new manager by Sunday. You might get the blue box on Sunday. You might get the blue box first thing Monday morning. I would assume it would be something where, like, especially if the Dodgers lose and the Blue Jays win, so you don't have to worry about a parade and a ceremony and all that. You could see something where, let's say Blue Jays win on Friday. They find a way to beat Yamamoto somehow. Blue box could drop on Sunday. Introductory press conference could be on Monday. Could be that quick. Because if the season ends on Friday, Wednesday is the start of free agency. You got to get this guy in and get him up to speed because you're making decisions by Wednesday. So definitely just want the World Series at this point to be over so that we can get a manager already. But again, the fact it's taken this long and there's only 3 good jobs left open makes me feel like it's probably Danny Lehman. In just a minute, let's talk about some prospects, okay? Baseball America gave out their report card. I call it a report card with air quotes because there was no actual grades in there. But let's talk about some of these prospect debuts, the good, the bad, all of that. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsey Crosby. If those of you watching on YouTube, sorry I keep turning to the side here while we're talking. I'm trying to stay square to the microphone here, but Bandit woke up from his nap in the middle of this recording, and so I'm just giving him treats every 10, 15 seconds to keep him from going all nuts. Okay, Baseball America put out their MLB Draft report card, which is really superlatives. Let's be clear what this is. This is not a report card. There's no grades. It's just superlatives. And it was really interesting, I'm not going to say for once, but it was really interesting because we actually got detail on the position players, right? So often in these, they have best fastball, best breaking ball, whatever. But a lot of the other stuff in the middle, the best power hitter, best pure hitter, fastest runner, it's some 14th round pick because Atlanta loaded up on arms. This year was different. It was a position player heavy draft early, and a lot of your best talents are hitters. And it's funny, some of the pitching awards kind of were what we expected, right? Briggs McKenzie, the 4th rounder out of North Carolina, the prep lefty, he got best secondary pitch. He can run that curveball up to 3,000 RPM. He was doing that in high school. That makes sense. Landon Beetleshees out of Arkansas, the 6th round lefty, he got best fastball. He's got a mid-90s heater, touches 98. It's got a lot of, high, carry, induced vertical break. So it plays really well up in the zone. I'm going to do that thing real quick where I kind of toot my own horn for a second. Those of you who remember the day one recap podcast that I did on Sunday night after day one of the draft, and the timing of that, it was kind of late at night because when the draft finished, I then hopped on a Zoom with Ronit Shaw, Atlanta's director of amateur scouting, to do his post day one kind of chat with us about the guys they took and all of that. But at the end of that show, I talked about Tate Southesine, Alex Lodis, Cody Miller, those guys early. The end of that show, I named 6 players that I wanted Atlanta to grab in day 2. 2 of the 6 players that I named, Briggs McKenzie, Landon Beetleshees. So shout out to Atlanta's organization for watching and reading Braves Today. I really appreciate you guys. I just kind of wanted to toot my own horn there for a second. I was going back and checking my notes, and I remember somebody pointing out the Beetleshees pick as soon as it happened, tweeting at me "Hey, you called this on the show." I had forgotten that I called out Briggs McKenzie. So let's take that. I'm excited and proud about that. But a lot of the position ones were really interesting in this write-up, right? I think we underestimated Cody Miller, the 3rd rounder out of East Tennessee State University, ETSU. He hit .330 in his college career, and that final year, he had a 92% zone contact percentage, right? If he swung at a ball in the zone, 92 times out of 100, he's making contact. So 8% whiff rate in the zone. That is exceptional, right? So he gets in Atlanta's system, 26 games between single A and high A, 327 average, 381 on base, 449 slug. He did share some time with Alex Lodis when he got to Rome. So he played short, but he also played second and third. Really good contact. He's got really good athleticism. I think he's a little underrated on the athleticism standpoint. They called him the best pure hitter. I really do think he's one of those guys that could move through the system quickly because he's so athletic and he has such a strong contact base. Now, the question's going to be, how much power can he hit for? That's obviously the big deal, and how does he translate to the wood bat? In a small sample, 1 month of games, it translated pretty well. 449 slug, 327 average. As he gets farther up, I imagine he probably goes back to Rome to start the year and goes Rome to Columbus. Question's going to be, can he keep this going when he faces tougher competition? Another guy that was kind of underrated, and I think some of it's because of Atlanta announcing him as a second baseman, but Dixon Williams, the compensatory pick in the 4th round out of Eastern Carolina. He was actually the guy that was taken with the pick we got for Max Fried walking in free agency. He only played second base for Augusta. He DH'd like twice, but he didn't play any shortstop or anything. He was just second base, and they announced him as a second baseman. They didn't announce him as a shortstop with the intention of moving him. They announced him at second base. 269, 395 on base, 462 slug, 2 homers, 13 RBI, 14 runs in his 28 games. The thing that really surprised me, and I just wasn't very familiar with him from, I didn't watch a ton of East Carolina baseball this year, was he looked really comfortable on the base paths. He was 6-0 in stolen bases, and he seemed to be really good at, the first to third stuff and all of that, all of that base running that can change a game on the margins. He's one of those guys, and I've talked about this before on the draft shows, Atlanta's been big in getting multi-sport guys who are just recently focusing on baseball exclusively. AJ Smith-Shawver was one of those guys. Or they get two-way players who are just focused now on one side of the ball. But Spitter Schwellenbach, he was a shortstop that also worked as the closer. And when he focused on just baseball, he became really good, right? Williams is a guy that played football as well. And he just recently started focusing on exclusively baseball. He was called the best pro debut by Baseball America. Cade Woods, the righty in the 10th round out of LSU, shared that award with him. That was a really interesting pick. He threw 32 innings across 3 years in college. Just could not really get healthy. Augusta used him 6 times on the mound, 13 2/3 innings, 16 strikeouts to 5 walks, 2.63 ERA. Now, didn't really see a third pitch, right? Fastball was like 93, 94 or so. Slider looked pretty good, but just never saw a third pitch. I don't know if they try to give him one and see if he can be a starter or if they just keep him in relief. And then the close to the majors one, I think, is a really interesting award that we need to pay attention to. Because this is typically where Baseball America is saying, hey, this guy can impact your major league roster quickly, okay? And Alex Lodice, the shortstop, got one. Miller, he got it. Beetleshees, if he stays as a reliever, got it as a guy that can move quickly. But the fourth guy that got it, somebody we've really not talked about, Logan Braunschweig, the outfielder out of UAB. They also called him the fastest runner, by the way. But he's a guy that they think could move rather quickly through the system. He had 26 games for High A Rome. He started in Rome. So he went straight to High A. 4 years in college, that kind of makes sense. It's kind of what you're going to do. But he went to High A Rome, hit 294 with a 406 on base and a 353 slug. 12 runs, 12 runs, 9 RBI. Did not hit a homer. Had, I think, 2 doubles and a triple. Spent a little bit of time in center field, like 11 innings, but was predominantly a left fielder. So I think what you're watching for here, he does have the ability to move quickly. The question's going to be, how does the power develop in pro ball? Because if he can figure out the power with the wood bat, which he was never a massive power guy at UAB, right? You look at his college career, he finished with 10 home runs across 4 seasons at UAB. He had 7 his final season, but the point is he had 10 home runs. He also stole 72 bags. So, he's using the speed. They called him fastest base runner of the class. He could be a fast-moving guy, and he could be, I think, if the power does develop a little more, he could be a guy that is a consideration to succeed Jurickson and Profar. Profar's only got 2 years left, 26 and 27. His contract's up. I really don't think Atlanta's going to want to re-sign him after the old PED suspension thing. So you have 2 seasons to see which of your outfielders your outfield prospects are ready to come up and contend for a starting role. If the power does not develop for Braunschweig, he's absolutely a fourth outfield candidate, a guy who can play the corners, although if you're not comfortable with him in center field, they'll have to work on that. If you're not comfortable with him in center field, it's really an atypical profile for a corner. But either way, I thought it was interesting that they named him the 9th round pick as one of the quick-moving players who's closest to the majors out of the class. Just thought that was really interesting. I think we all think about Lodis as the guy that we imagine is closest to the majors, and we're thinking about eventually getting him up. Probably 27, I think, would be the soonest we could realistically assume it could happen, so that you have a shortstop that can do more than one thing, that can both defend and hit. But interesting that they also have both Miller, who has played some shortstop, and Braunschweig in that group as well. That'll do it for the week over here on Braves Today. Obviously, some sort of crazy news happens over the weekend. We're going to be bringing you extra episodes. If you're listening on YouTube, you should be subscribed to the channel and hit the notification bell so you're aware when that happens, when we go live to talk about that. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave a 5-star review. Maybe also share the show with your friends. I really want to grow the audio side a little bit more so that the Believe Podcast Network puts more resources behind promoting the show, putting us in their weekly newsletter, and all that kind of stuff. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.